Stupidest 911 calls. 911 dispatchers, remember the most retarded call in the history of your work. Ambulance worker, does that count? A 19-year-old guy called an ambulance because his arm was stiff from playing Xbox for too long. My little sister once called 911 because her tiny lizard got pulled into a bathroom tube. The poor kid just wanted to bathe her gecko. His name was Steve. Sobbing, she dialed 911 and told them, "Steve is drowning, he got sucked into the pipe." By the time they found out Steve was a gecko, the police and fire brigade were on their way to her house. My sister was about 6 years old at the time. I still tease her about it, but I feel sorry for Steve. F in the chat for Steve. My mom works as a 911 dispatcher. Sometimes she has to answer extremely idiotic calls. For example, a few years ago, there was a big car accident that killed several people at once. Naturally, there was a traffic jam of several kilometers. At this point, a woman called 911 and asked for the police to accompany her home for, "Why the fuck do I have to be stuck in this traffic? I gotta go home." Look, lady, by the way, people died here. Somehow, you'll get over the fact that you missed the start of your favorite show. Before anyone asks, no, she didn't have a health problem. Unless you count megalomania. I'm a nurse, working as a dispatcher for a 24-hour hotline for people who have health problems. My main job is to determine whether or not a person needs to seek emergency medical care. Several favorite stories come to mind at once, but I'll tell you this one. A girl with a decent amount of pregnancy, I don't remember exactly how many weeks, but clearly over 30, calls and anxiously asks me to explain why her doctor told her to refuse intimate contact until the end of her pregnancy. After checking her data and seeing that she was having premature contractions, I began to tell her that sexual activity can cause contractions, so it was better for her to abstain so that the baby would stay inside as long as possible. She, sobbing, "Then how do you feed the baby?" Me, "Excuse me, ma'am, could you repeat what you just said?" Patient, "Then how am I supposed to feed the baby if we abstain?" Anyway, the patient was convinced that her baby was feeding on her boyfriend's semen, and that if they stopped being sexually active, their baby might starve to death. When I tried to explain to her what the umbilical cord was for, etc., she didn't believe me at first. I had to give the example of single moms and ask her how, by her logic, they carry and feed their babies. After a minute of silence, she thanked me, and before she could hang up, I heard her call out her boyfriend's name. He must have been baiting her for a rumpy pumpy, and he was good at it. I don't know who I felt more sorry for, him or the child who would have to live in this family. My mom used to work as a 911 dispatcher. When she first got a job, she told my little brother that she now worked wherever the call went by dialing 911. The next day, little one called 911 because he wanted to tell his mom how his day was going. I'm not a dispatcher, but I want to tell you about my ex's call. He always worked the evening shift and came home from work around 2 a.m. However, that night, he left a few hours later. X. "Hello, I would like to report a fire." We live in a place where fires happen all the time, plus it was fire season back then. 911. "Sir, where is the fire happening?" X. "On the mountainside of the south of town." 911. "May you be more specific?" Typing something in the background. X. Describes exact location. "Oh no, God, it's getting bigger! The whole top of the mountain is on fire!" 911. "Sir, please don't worry, help is on the way." X. "Damn it, it's getting bigger and bigger! Am I the only one seeing this? There's such a light coming from him! The whole sky is glowing! God! Oh, wait a minute." 911. "Sir?" X. "Excuse me, the thing is I'm rarely out this time of day. I got held up at work today. Anyway, this fire, it's the sun." 911. X. "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry for wasting your time. There's no fire. It was just the sun coming up. I'm so ashamed." 911. "That's okay, sir. I'll cancel the call. Thanks for calling." Edit. He said I missed a few details, so I updated the comment. Emergency doctor. There was a case where we were sent at 3 a.m. to a dude who was picking at his wart, got scared of blood, and called 911. That was it. That's the story. My mom works as a 911 operator. One time she got a call from some schoolgirl and panicked, in all seriousness, about a squirrel sitting on a telephone pole near her school and wouldn't come down. How could anyone think it was an emergency? "You don't seem to understand. Squirrel might have fallen." One time, some drunk guy calls up and reports he's being molested. And in fact, he was being arrested by our officers at the time because the dude was throwing pizzas at passerby. You could hear one of our cops say to him in the background, "Pray it's not our operator you're tied up with." Whereupon my colleague took his phone from him and informed me that the dude was going with them, and he hung up on me. It still makes me laugh when I remember it. We also once had a drunk woman call 911 and complain that she had forgotten her phone password. Oh, I accidentally locked my phone once too and called 911. I entered the wrong code several times and didn't know what to do next. Of the options, there was only emergency call. My young brain thought I would be connected to a service that would help me reset my password, but instead I heard, 911, what's your emergency? Wait, what? Oh shit, I didn't know. Sorry! Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. I'm sorry, please. Yeah, that was embarrassing. I've been in this business for 22 years. If the call starts with the words, I swear I'm not crazy, you better prepare yourself mentally for something extremely badass. This one started a call from a dude who ran away from his crib to the nearest store because his roommates are now turning into giant crabs. He asked that an officer be sent to him to take a look at how they were transforming into giant cocoons. As you might have guessed, the dude was going through a major bad trip. I'm not a dispatcher, I'm a prosecutor. There's a story about a kid in a dorm. Anyway, they had a common space in the dorm where the residents could come at any time to relax, and there was a microwave, which was kindly provided by the owner of the building. So one time the microwave disappeared, and this kid called 911 in the middle of the night to report it missing. The conversation with the dispatcher went something like this. Dispatcher: so you dialed 911 because someone stole a microwave? Someone else's microwave? Did you check with the owner to see if he took it? Kid: no. Dispatcher: well, sir, it's not an emergency call. Kid: but I'm really hungry. The dude turned out to be persistent. He tried to explain to the dispatcher that this was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Meanwhile, there were people hanging on the line who really needed help. This genius asked for a police squad to take care of the missing microwave. And they did send him a couple of cops, only not for the microwave, but to teach him a lesson for mishandling 911. At trial, he pleaded not guilty and demanded a jury trial. It only took 20 minutes in court to reach a guilty verdict. I believe the judge laughed at the bluntness of the man for 17 minutes and came to his senses for 2 minutes, and only at the last minute thought about the verdict. I'm an emergency medical technician. At 2 a.m. I received a call from a young girl. The complaint? Her legs were turning blue. Upon arrival, it turned out she had been out clubbing all night, wearing new jeans. I go to nursing school now. We have a textbook that says if a person complains of blue palms, you have to ask if they're wearing new jeans. That seems to be a pretty common thing. I work at a trauma center. We once had a guy brought to us by the emergency who had just broken his finger. He and his wife demanded an ambulance, even though they were literally a couple of blocks away, all because of some broken finger. Edit. We also once had a guy brought in who decided to fill up his lawnmower while smoking a cigarette. Bottom line, 60% body burn. Extremely sad and dumb story at the same time. Worked as a 911 operator for 15 years. Stories abound. One time someone called 911 to ask how to smoke a brisket. Once someone called 911 to ask about parking tickets. Once someone called 911 to wish me a Merry Christmas. It was 3 a.m. I was working on Christmas Day. One time someone called 911 because his trunk was jammed and he didn't know what to do. Once someone called 911 because he saw a dark-skinned man in his village and said, "We don't usually have those around here. He's kind of suspicious." And people also call 911 because they're just lonely. There must have been 1,000 calls like that. And there was a lot of other funny stuff. I worked there for a long time after all. Do citizens abuse the system? Undoubtedly, yes. But in general, I'm glad that the younger generations knows that you should only call 911 when either your life is in danger or a crime is going on nearby. Me. 911, this conversation is being recorded. What's your emergency? Caller. I don't know if this is important or not. 4 days ago, I noticed a U-Haul truck pulling up to my neighbor's, the company that helps with moving. Me. So, caller. 2 suspicious types got out of it. I saw them walking around the house. You could tell by their movements that they weren't supposed to be there. Me. 4 days ago, you say? Caller. Yeah, I'm worried about something, because the neighbors are on vacation now. They shouldn't have anyone there. Me. Okay, we'll check it out. Turns out the neighbor's whole house had been ransacked. Everything of most value had been successfully stolen. There was nothing at the local pawn shops anymore because they are always aware when they get their stolen goods and they sell them as soon as possible. Pro tip, if something looks suspicious to you, don't take too long to break down whether or not to call the police. If the dispatcher thinks your complaint is irrelevant, you can file a complaint against him. I used to work as a 911 operator. There was a call from a woman who reported she was following a man with one leg sticking out of his car. Said she had been following him for some time. He was not speeding. The belt was in place, he wasn't texting with anyone behind the wheel, he just stuck one foot out the window. It was very important to her that the police come and punish him. I had to explain to her that the man was not breaking any laws. Unfortunately, she couldn't figure out how we were allowed to drive with one leg out. After telling me off for not knowing the law, she hung up and called 911 again, hoping that she would be connected to another operator who would help her punish the man. But I was on the line again. I redirected her to a sheriff's deputy who explained to her that if she didn't stop calling 911 for nothing, she would get a fine for abuse of emergency services. When my buddy was very young, he called 911 and told them his aunt was in labor. She was already in the hospital. It reminded me of the story of a family I used to babysit. Dispatcher: "What's your emergency?" 4-year-old: "I cut my finger." Dispatcher: "Is it bleeding?" 4-year-old: "Yeah, a little bit." Dispatcher: "Say, kid, is mom or dad around? Can either of them wash your finger and put a band-aid on the wound?" 4-year-old: "Mommy's around, but she fell down and won't talk." Anyway, the little one called, not because he cut himself, but because he showed his paper cut to his mom and she passed out at the sight of a single drop of blood. Falling down, she hit her head and was unconscious for a while. Edit. Okay, if you want a sequel, here it is. Mom was taken to the hospital. They pumped her full of oxygen or whatever. So as long as she woke up the same day and she was fine, her head was still intact. She's a great mom, just a little impressionable. And Nick, 4-year-old son, got a super fancy patch with Elmo from Sesame Street. "My washing machine is telling me I have to declare bankruptcy." It was a little sad as it was a very confused older woman calling. At that moment, it was like I was at a loss for words. I think I answered her, what? Thank you very much for watching. In the comments, people who work in similar organizations, post your stories and don't forget to watch our other episodes. Bye!